Hey, it's Drybear. Today I wanted to walk through the build that I've been working on for the Abyss League. As I've been covering a little bit of Path of Exile 2, a lot of people have been asking, hey, can we get a reference for your build for people that are interested? The core of it is a Frostbolt build. It is a cold damage Sorceress build, and it ended up being pretty fun. So today I'm going to share my Path of Building link and walk through the functionality of the build and how it works. Now, the primary function of the damage is going to be Frostbolt in general, with things like Snake Pit and Split Shot, forking and dealing damage, freezing targets. It's also super safe because it freezes most targets almost instantly, except for bosses, and even then bosses can sometimes get instantly frozen, and the burst damage is really strong as well. I'm going to try and work through like a early, mid, late game build because, you know, it's a Sorceress build. A lot of times your late game armor, late game gear and bonuses are going to allow you to deal a lot more damage and also simplify your rotation. However, if you're using this build for campaign or middle game before you get to Atlas, there will be some extra steps that you put in, like extra abilities to try and bridge that gap before you get all of those functionalities online for Endgame. There's also some cool new things added to the game with some of the new lineage supports that allows you to get a lot more spread on enemies. And I also think just in general, especially with the Abyss League, having a build that does have some kind of hard CC like freeze in part of it does make things a little bit simpler and easier. And it's also really chill and easy, pun intended, for farming and getting currency and things like that, while still being capable of extreme single target damage for uber bosses and late game clearing like that. So I've put the Path of Building link in the description if you wanted to follow along or use it as reference. Another note on this as well, generally when I post endgame builds for ARPGs, I usually try to aim between like 90 to 95% efficient, like perfectly optimized up to that level. The difference here is that in order to get it from 95% optimized to like 99 or 100% optimized takes a lot of effort to kind of minutia move things around and get the right stats. So this is basically like really close to perfectly optimized, but there's still some decisions you can make on how you want to play the build or make modifications to it. Now, before you dive into the specifics and walk through how the build works, there's going to be like a decision that you need to make, especially in the current state of the game right now, and that is whether you're going to go energy shield or a different option. Personally, I got kind of tired of running Energy Shield just because it's so incredibly powerful. It has been since .1. I wanted to try something new. I haven't run Eldritch Battery in quite a while, so this is going to be a build that uses sharing damage from mana, right? Like damage taken from mana before life. What's beautiful about this is you get a lot more mana recovery and regeneration, which means you can very easily just spam as much as you want using a whole bunch of spells. You have a bigger mana pool. But if you're wondering or curious, at least from my perspective, what the difference is between a pure ES build for something like this versus an Eldritch Battery build is two major downsides. The first one is an ES build is better for avoiding one-shots. That's primarily because you just get such ridiculous effective HP from a pure energy shield build, especially if you're doing CI to be immune to bleeds and poisons and things like that, that it ends up being a really, really big boon for avoiding one-shots. Now, the build that I'm going to share to you today is an Eldritch Battery build that uses, takes damage from mana before life. I found it a lot more fun, and it also is very enjoyable for like medium to lower difficulty farming, just because you have so much mana and your regeneration is so ridiculously high that it's very enjoyable. But unlike a pure ES build, we can't run Ice Archon with this setup, and we also will have issues with some of the really big telegraphed hits that are one-shots, right? With a pure ES build, you can eat those to the face in a lot of cases, especially if you're 10 to 14k energy shield. It's quite substantial, but you end up having more mana problems from that as well. So if you wanted to, you could run an ES variant of this. It does allow you to run Ice Archon. Personally, the Archons, I wasn't super impressed with them in general. Like if we jump in game here, like the Archon itself, like in order to do Ice Archon, you have to be able to have Energy Shield recharge. And if you're running Eldritch Battery, that eliminates that. That gets rid of it. So there's some benefits to Ice Archon. It does give you some damage bonuses and things like that. It doesn't have 100% uptime. So there's definitely some downsides along with that. But I just wanted to make that clear. If you wanted to modify this build to be more Energy Shield focused, you could. You'll have more mana problems, but you'll be able to survive those really big hits a lot easier. So we'll start with an explanation of the build for the endgame variant. Once you have uniques and really good stats online, you can actually make use of spell forking and splitting and things like that. And then after, once we're done with the endgame variation, section, we'll talk about how you can make this work for early to mid game, which will require other skills, things like Orb of Storms or like Frost Bomb, or even using Frost Wall a little bit more, just because you won't be able to have the same passive effects from the end game variant. So like I said, your primary damage is going to come from Frostbolt. So you'll be able to shoot this Frostbolt out and it will deal damage. It generally is a little bit slower, so we're going to run a lot of like projectile speed and things like that to speed up the projectile. What's cool about this is there is a lineage support for Frostbolt that allows you to convert your projectile speed or your cast speed into projectile speed to speed it up. So you can actually get a pretty fast moving projectile here for Frostbolt that ends up covering the whole screen a lot of ways. We can also get the new Sion's Temper as well. If I can move my face here. Sion's Temper allows you to get some really, really strong wild shards. And because our cast speed is so incredibly high, we're able to spread this out pretty substantially to cover the screen. And don't worry, I have everything in the Path of Building. So if I skip over minor details here, you can find it all there. You can use that as a reference if you're interested. So step one is Frostbolt, simple projectile. It shoots out. When it deals damage, it'll kind of apply a freeze buildup on the target and does cold damage as well. However, if it collides with terrain, it will often explode, or if it hits targets, or especially if it hits Frost Wall as well, you can cause it to explode and fork as well for your end game variant. So some pretty strong damage there as well. However, we're going to pair this with a cast on critical too. And what's great about this is we can actually get a very substantial crit rate. This build is far from optimized, at least in my variant, because I haven't done a whole lot of sanctifying and corrupting and get some better stats here. But you can see that I already have an 83% crit rate, which means I'm critting basically every hit. And with the sheer amount of hits that we have, the weighting changes slightly. Like we can actually get very, very high crit rate, which means our cast on critical will be triggering constantly. Now, from cast on critical, what we're going to run is Comet, because it gives us a very large amount of single target damage with it, especially when you beef it up like crazy and get some really cool triggers from it. What I love too is they ended up adding more trigger options for us, which means that for like cast on critical, spell slinger, things like that, we can end up getting a large amount of damage from this as well. And oftentimes what you'll get from this is you'll end up spamming this over and over and over. When your cast on critical hits, you'll see a comet come down and it'll usually one-shot a rare or get a very big chunk out of a boss once you get that going as well. Now, once you have the build fully kind of fleshed out, you don't really need to do anything but cast Frostbolt in order to clear most mobs. And in a lot of cases, a lot of rares as well. Like just the damage from just spamming Frostbolt over and over is incredibly powerful and will give you a lot of damage throughput from that standpoint. However, it does have a little bit of a limit. It's not going to be as bursty as like a snipe or something like that. So you do have to kind of add in extra elements to give you some extra damage when a target ends up being either resistant to cold or is just a really beefy boss that's really strong. So let's talk about how you can use those combos for endgame to be able to build up your single target damage when you need to. The most obvious choice is going to be applying weakness, like the vulnerability that you get for elemental. So we run elemental weakness. My favorite version of this is the one that persists. You can actually get you can have it like stay in the zone as well. So it actually just stays on the ground and you'll be able to support it that way, which is really cool. So anyone inside of this area can deal, has the vulnerability applied to them. So you can do more cold damage from that. So that gives you a lot of single target damage. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you have to walk around and cast elemental weakness on every target, because again, Frostbolt will kill anything that's not a substantial target. But when you do get to a very strong rare or you get to a boss, you will want to make sure that they have elemental weakness on the ground and they're standing in it, so you can make sure you have that vulnerability as well. The next thing is, because we have cast on critical, adding something to the build that will allow us to do a large number of hits is super useful, because then we can almost instantly stack up cast on critical to give us that bonus there. And we do that with Frost Wall. So with Frost Wall, by default, it's actually quite small. So we're going to modify it here. I usually end up running Fortress with Spell Cascade. Those two together end up giving you a circular Frost Wall and then 2 Frost Walls as well. So when you cast it, you can see 2 bubbles added to each other as well. The one thing you'll have to note is until you get spell forking online, either through like a snake pit or some different choices you can make in the skill tree, you will end up, Frostwall becomes kind of an acquired taste, because what you can do is you can end up getting yourself trapped. Like you can actually get trapped inside of it and it gets really awkward, things like that. But again, once you have spell forking online, your Frostbolts will destroy the walls and cause them to detonate. But what's cool is that if you have a target inside of your elemental weakness and you drop down the Frost Wall, you can actually just cause it to detonate. But what's even cooler than that is if you end up getting onto an Orb of Storms and you get a lightning infusion on you, when you put down the Frost Wall, it will consume consume the lightning infusion to do an additional hit of lightning for every hit that you get for cold, right? So once it's lightning infused, you get the cold damage, but you also get the lightning damage, and those can all crit too. So oftentimes you'll put down the weakness, throw it on the wall, and then you'll be able to detonate all of these, and you'll see their freeze meter go instantly to full, and you'll see your cast on critical go instantly to full, and oftentimes even on bosses, you end up getting like 5 or 6 comets in a row because it's hitting so often and all those hits are crits. It builds up so fast, you get a whole bunch of meteors coming down, which ends up blowing the target to smithereens. I also have Snap in the build, which you can use on your Frostbolts directly, which is really cool. So you can actually throw the Frostbolts up in the air, Snap or Cold Snap, the old Cold Snap, on the flying Frostbolt projectile, and it will trigger on frost walls as well. So as you're shooting it out, you can use it. Again, once you get the whole build put together and you have a decent amount of invested into it in endgame, you don't really need to snap all that much. It can be useful for helping in single target situations, but it's not going to be as needed. But we'll talk about that in the early game versions. You will be using Snap, Frost Wall, Frost Bomb, Orb of Storms to bridge the gap that your end game will clear for you. Next, let's talk about the passive skill tree. And again, one of the challenges with Sorceress builds, I feel like the passive skill tree changes so much from early to mid to late game. I feel like a lot of the other classes don't have this much variability in what you use in your tree, just because early on you do need a significant amount of spell power. So coming out of the start here, let's just walk through the process of what I would look at when you were going through the leveling process. Again, at the very beginning of the game, at least for like Act 1, Act 2, I would say your most important stat is just going to be raw damage. Oftentimes you can just clear the campaign by doing enough damage. You certainly don't want no defenses, right? So you just get picked off by random things, and you want to be able to keep up with your resistances, especially as they get lowered from the penalties as you move through the acts. But again, you're going to want to get as much spell damage as you possibly can right off the jump. So we're going to start here. We're going to pick up spell damage, spell damage, spell damage, and we're going to go here and get spell damage. Another tight point, especially when you're leveling this, is going to be making sure you have enough dexterity and intelligence to use these items that you need and the skills that you need and the support gems that you need to get things going. So I generally will come up here, grab these for the extra int, and then come up here and get the extra resistance plus elemental damage. Then we want to get cast speed. Even while leveling, it's incredibly powerful, but it's super important for endgame that you have a large amount of cast speed, because it ends up being a very big break point for the amount of damage that you can deal, and it also will be applied to projectile speed as well with the new lineage support that we have. So we're going to go ahead and grab all these here. Then you're going to come up and you're going to get crit chance. This is just good in general. The crit will give you a lot of late game, like even like early, mid, and late game scaling. And it doesn't really matter as much how much crit chance you have until you get cast on critical. Then you want to get as much crit chance as possible. So you're building that up as fast as possible. So we're going to go up here and grab those. Personally, for me, it's going to be a little tight. So while you're leveling, what I would do is I would come up here from these, get the crit chance, and then I would grab this node. Like this cluster is super useful while leveling, just because it gives you a large amount of spell damage, like 30% plus 30. This is 60% spell damage right out of the opening area. It gives it a large amount of damage throughput. You can also come up here and get, things like the crit bonus, since you're not gonna be running with things like the endgame gloves, the Malagoros, which sets your crit damage bonus to 250. So until you have that online, you can easily, run up and get some of those like crit bonuses that could be really useful, even get more crit chance there. And if you want to run the energy shield variant, you can come over here and get Ice Archon, but I would just come straight up here and get all this cold damage bonus on top of having cold skills. Unfortunately, we're in an era right now for Path of Exile 2 where level of skills is king. It is by far one of the biggest contributors to your skill damage, more than any other. Personally, I kind of wish that they would lower the impact of level of skills and try and distribute that power gain from other areas, because it really does lock you. Like you want to get like 5 cold skills and cold skills and cold skills. You put it on everything because it's so incredibly powerful that you have to have it. So coming out here and even just getting 1 level of all cold skills while, while this node here is super powerful. I also like freeze buildup and freeze duration. There's gonna be some combos for like mid and late game that work well here. So having freeze buildup makes you safer in dangerous areas, especially in the abyss when a lot of mobs pop up from the ground, or if there's like shade walkers that teleport on top of you, being able to freeze them quickly is super powerful. There's also some nodes over here where you end up doing like, damage ignores resistance on frozen enemies, can be super useful, plus more freeze buildup there. Then from here, what I would do is probably, like, you play with a different couple options. For the end game variant, you're going to want to come over here and get pretty much all of these nodes, right? If you're running the Eldritch Battery variant that I have on my Path of Building, you're going to want to get a lot of mana regen, because mana is not only your ability to deal damage, but it's also your ability to survive. So more mana equals more effective HP. More mana regen is effectively effective HP regeneration as well. So getting mana regeneration is super important. You come over here, grab all of these, and then pick up Eldritch Battery as well. Then as you start pushing more towards endgame, we're going to get crit chance. Again, this is primarily just to be able to, you know, have enough crit to cast on critical often. There's also some survivability aspects here. Controlling magic is super nice because it means that you have reduced crit chance against you. This is very useful unless you're running like a super juiced map where they have like infinite crit chance and everything crits all the time, but that is super useful there. Then we're gonna come over here and we're gonna grab some extra spell damage plus projectile speed. Again, projectile speed is actually super useful for this build. Frostbolt in general by default without modifiers is quite slow. It's a very slow projectile, and oftentimes you really just want to be able to get those projectiles out, covering as much space as possible and keeping you safe while also killing enemies. So grabbing these here is nice. We also want to grab a decent amount of jewel sockets. You could probably even run a variant of this build where you get some extra jewel sockets. Like you come over here, grab the jewel socket here. There's a jewel socket there. You can even get the jewel sockets down this way as well and get a lot of jewels out of that just to get that done. Then we want to grab the triggered spells. This is going to directly affect your comet. So when you get enough cast on critical stacks and you get that comet coming down, which does a large amount of damage, getting these extra values here is going to make it stronger. But also this last one's really nice. This means that it gives 40% increased spell damage on that big fat comet, and it also gives you mana cost efficiency. There's two main areas where we're going to pick up mana cost efficiency, and this is super useful because it just lowers all your costs for mana, which means you can use more things. And again, if you're running Eldritch Battery, mana cost efficiency, mana is your health in a lot of ways. So we're going to pick that up, and there's also some mana cost efficiency over here down by the monk/shadow starting area. So 15, 8, 8, and then you can add that over here to this 10%. It goes a long way. Like not having that extra 30 to 50% mana cost efficiency, you will notice a massive difference in the amount of mana that you spend while casting. Then we're gonna come down here, and this cluster is super valuable for any spell-based or cold-based ability setup here. I have this set up right now, but I would actually modify this, you know, as you get closer and you play around with some other things. I've been testing variants, and so this is not gonna be like perfectly accurate to my Path of Building, but this cluster is super useful because you get cold damage, you can get freeze buildup and penetrating resistance when the target is frozen. You also get damage against enemies that are frozen. 50% increased damage. This thin ice node, you could anoint it if you really wanted to, though I would argue that split shot is much better for the anoint, which allows you to do additional projectiles when forking, which if you have snakebite and you throw this out, it's gonna fork like crazy and do additional projectiles that come out of it as well, which is really nice. Then we get some free crit chance here, really large crit chance. The reduced crit damage bonus is worth it here in this case because this crit chance increase is really large. And again, once you get to late game and you have enough to get the Malagoro's Virtuoso where your crit damage bonus is fixed, then you don't have to worry about that as much anymore. And then we're gonna come here and grab damage taken from mana before life, damage taken from mana before life, damage taken from mana before life. And we're also gonna be able to pick that up from the Stormweaver Ascendancy as well, damage taken from mana before life. I think I have about 80% damage taken from mana before life right now, and it splits between my HP and my mana. I would say once you have a full build, you can probably get to maybe 5,000 to 7,000 effective HP while being able to use some of that for casting. It's not the same effective HP you'd get for Energy Shield, which can be like 10 to 14K, but again, it's a lot more usable for most purposes, and you'll kind of have to make that decision on which direction you want to go in general. So then once we're up here, we're good to go. We can stop on that front as well. But because it is a high skill speed, high cast speed, spamming build, I pray and I hope and I wish that GGG makes nodes like these skill speed nodes available in other areas of the tree. Like we basically have these nodes here, and then there's also skill speed down here by the rangers, like things like this. We need more of these. Like these are, skill speed is such an insanely valuable stat. To only have it in a few places on the tree forces builds to go to that area just to be able to use it. But luckily we're right next to the monk's shadow starting area, so we're gonna come over and grab it. So from this area, you can actually just cut over here, grab this, We're going to want to get more mana cost efficiency, more mana regeneration for the Eldritch Battery variant of this build. I do like running max mana recovered on kill, especially for general mapping. And, you know, now outside of Ubers, we don't have to worry about that too much. But for just mapping, I think you want to have that extra mana recovery because, again, it is still your survivability if you're running Eldritch. We're going to come here and we're going to grab crit chance, crit chance, crit chance. This just allows us to stack more and more crit chance. Again, you want to aim for about 80 to 90% crit chance just to be able to get your COC to trigger regularly. Then we're going to come over here and so there's a couple things to know about this. First is if you're running this node here, Shaper of Storms, all damage contributes to shock. You can get extra shocks in there. And then additionally, you can get 2 shocks on the target. And shock is, in my opinion, the best status effect in the game because it's just a raw damage amp. So if you get double shocks, plus you can get anything can apply shock, and you can increase the magnitude of shock, your damage amp is just global and super valuable. So we're gonna come over here, we're gonna get magnitude of shock, mana regen, mana regen, mana regen, and then mana regen and shock. So this tree right here is just perfect for this build. Now, until you have like if you're gonna run this node, you don't have to worry about anything else because you'll be able to apply shock naturally. But if you don't, you can just use Orb of Storms. It's a very easy way, like it'll just chain the targets, and also is allowing you to get these lightning infusions for your Frost Wall, just to get that extra damage from that as well. So those all work perfectly for the build. Then we're gonna come down here to the monk starting area, and we're very interested in a lot of these nodes right here, just because they have such a big contribution to the overall efficacy. The first thing to know about this area is going to be the skill speed. So because we can come down here, we can pick up skill speed, skill speed, skill speed, skill speed, and extra stats as well, plus mana regen. So these nodes are just so good for spamming builds because the skill speed makes a really big difference in your output. Then we get a little bit of crit chance here. This allows us to get some extra crit chance and also gives us a damage amp if you've dealt a critical hit as well. If you run with this jewel, the From Nothing, for Mind over Matter, in my opinion, I've tried both of these. I don't even know if I still have it in my inventory. So you can actually run one where you get the From Nothing, which is a very cheap jewel. It allows you to apply nodes without being in that area in general. So I would get Mind over Matter, and this gives you these nodes here, which are very powerful, but also gives you increased effect of Arcane Surge. So these 3 nodes here are so good. I was playing around with some stats. I could probably move some of these over here just to get it. Ultimately, I'd probably want to get, like if we go to my Path of Building for this in general, I would actually just get potentially even all 3 of these. The main reason is if you're running Stormweaver, if you've never played Stormweaver before, is we get permanent Arcane Surge. So from this constant gale, we get Arcane Surge. And what does Arcane Surge do for us? Increased cast speed and increased mana regen. Perfect for this build. The cast speed becomes projectile speed. We get to spam more often, and it gives us mana regen, which again, if you're running Eldritch Battery, it's your survivability, which is super cool. And then increasing that amount just gives you more cast speed and more mana regeneration, which is super useful. You can also get magnitude of shock from this plus duration as well. And you can even get penetration for when the target isn't frozen, and even some extra elemental damage from this too. But what you could do, which I did experiment with when I was pushing like, T16s, is you could, instead of going over like grabbing these here, what you could do is you could actually come over this way, come down and grab these by just navigating the tree, and then instead come over here and get Hollow Palm, which allows you to get projectile speed and projectile damage and movement speed, plus a little bit of Mana Flask. I like having these Mana Flask charge reductions because sometimes you can run out of Mana Flask charge in difficult fights, or especially if you're doing like King of the Mists, where you have many waves over and over, and sometimes you run out of flash charges. So having these here can be super useful, but also getting projectile speed and projectile damage plus movement speed is real nice here, which you can get from a From Nothing diamond that you apply to Hollow Palm instead of running it through Mind over Matter. It's kind of about the same effectiveness, being able to get here and go over and grab these naturally, or you can come over there and use the jewel to be able to get to it. So this is what I would run with, but you could also potentially come over here and grab these naturally, and then run Hollow Palm from Nothing, and then grab these nodes from that as well. Then another massive contribution to your damage output is going to be these nodes. I don't know about you guys, but I kind of feel like the Monk Shadow starting area is a little bit too oversaturated for how good it actually is. Like, you've got crit damage, you've got extra damage as lightning, extra damage as cold, you got movement speed, skill speed. Like, this area is so like above everything else. If you really wanted to, you could even do crit, well, you don't need those if you're running with Malagoros, but you could get more skill speed here. We're gonna grab those, and then the other thing is gonna be Essence of the Storm and Essence of the Mountain. This 5% damage on these extra notes is actually really good, and you get 30% increased chance to shock shock, which is useful too. We want to grab the mana efficiency, mana cost efficiency we talked about earlier, and that's kind of the whole layout that you're looking for when you're running through the passive tree. So you're gonna get some really good value out of that. There's some other things that you can do, some really cheeky beaky things. If you wanted to play around with weapon set skill points, what I would do, and what I've been playing around with, is you can actually run a second weapon inside of your offset. So like if we run here to this, you can run like a Sigil of Power staff, like a chiming staff here in this. And then for your weapon set points, you can allocate these nodes. Since we're already in this area and we're ready to go, you can make it so that when you're casting Elemental Weakness, it switches to a weapon set point that has these here. So like Cursed Area, Cursed Area, Cursed Area, Cursed Magnitude, Hindered for movement speed, skill effect duration, skill effect duration, skill effect duration. This means that your elemental weakness is just going to be way easier to use, and it doesn't affect your Frostbolt build, because if you're using everything on your primary setup and then you switch to your secondary setup just to cast elemental weakness, since they removed the animation time for switching between weapon sets, it makes it super easy to get that value there. And I think this is an easy setup if you wanted to go down that road. Now again, while leveling, what I would do is just try to get you can even just grab some of these elemental damage nodes here, get the spell damage here, come up here, grab these. I would grab this set. I almost always, when I'm leveling a sorceress, I grab this set here. It's right here in the beginning, gives you a large amount of spell damage, and then while you're leveling as well, instead of going straight up here to the cold, you can also grab these nodes. These can be super useful for getting a whole bunch of elemental damage plus exposure, and you also get ailments on the target that scale up your damage as well. Some of these are just very accessible. If you really wanted to, you could even come over here and get some of these nodes as well, just from some extra power, for power based on ailments and things like that. And there's also a whole bunch of energy shield nodes that you can pick up, like energy shield here, energy shield there, energy shield here, there's energy shield up here. All of these are good if you're running an ES variant of this build. So that's the setup for the passive skill tree. Again, it's on the path of building if you wanted to reference it. Next, let's talk about gear. I'm gonna try and split this up. Again, I think you could run this mana from life versus like Eldritch Battery versus just pure energy shield. The way I have this set up right now is for Eldritch Battery. So you can see that I'm running a Feathered Raiment, which has damage taken from mana before life as a like an actual desecrated stat, plus the implicit stat on Feathered Raiment. And you can also run the Great Wolf's Rune of Willpower for additional damage taken from mana before life. Like I said, you can get to like 70 to 90% damage taken from mana before life. Because you have such massive mana regeneration, you're going to be kind of regenerating that constantly, and then it uses both pools where it'll try to chew through your mana first and then go through your life as a last resort, and it does provide a decent amount of survivability. However, if you're going to be running with the Eldritch Battery variant, I do think you still want to get like increased mana, like increased maximum mana on pretty much everything. So a ring with percent increased maximum mana plus flat mana. You want to focus with flat mana. You want to put flat mana on your wand. You can get some extra mana on your helm as well, plus a few other sources that gives it up here. Like I said, I think right now I have about 3,000 mana and 1,500 life with Eldritch. I would say that if you ran into like some better stat setups, you can see my POB has 4,000 mana and 2,000 life, which gets to about 6,000 effective HP from that standpoint, and also gives you a very large amount of mana to play around with while spellcasting. So that's going to be that variant there. But again, if you wanted to run this, you would just do a standard. I feel like Energy Shield is so overdone at this point. Like there's just so many variants on it, and there's so much theory crafting on it that it's pretty straightforward. You just want to get a big fat body armor that has crazy Energy Shield on it. And then from that standpoint, I would grab all these Energy Shield nodes along the way. You can grab these here, you can grab these here, you can even grab these up here, and then you can also come up and get Ice Archon if you wanted to do that too. So Ice Archon just gives you that energy recharge, and it gives you the extra damage from Ice Archon too, but you need to be able to get Energy Shield recharge to get that to trigger. So for best in slot, what I would consider this for, like the wand, I would use a dueling wand in your main hand. I would get the Spell Skills Rune. The big challenge here is the Spell Skills Rune is incredibly expensive, so you're probably going to get this closer to as you're finishing your end game push, but you want to run, I personally like running Extra Cold and Extra Lightning on the wand. You could potentially do just Extra Cold, but I think that having the Extra Lightning there is really nice for maintaining your double stacks of shock, especially if you're not going to be casting Orb of Storms as much, which is really nice. Maximum mana is super important if you're running Eldritch Battery. Level of all cold spells, skills, cast speed, and mana regeneration. You're going to want to get as many of these as you possibly can. For the focus, I would do the same thing, but in this case, I would get Energy Shield. Now, what's kind of weird about Eldritch Battery is it converts your unmodified energy shield into mana. So when you add like additional energy shield, sometimes it's not going to be, it won't apply to the amount of mana you get from it. Like if it's like an ad hoc calculation after Eldritch Battery has been applied, you still want to have energy shield on things. Like we're going to get energy shield on the focus. We're going to get it on the chest, on the boots, all of those going to try and get as much energy shield as we can for our baseline energy shield so that we can convert that into mana. So we're going to run with that there. For the focus again, we want level of all spell skills. They're going to want crit chance for spells, cast speed, and then flat maximum mana. So that extra crit chance is going to go a long way, and coming from the focus is going to be really easy as well. When we're talking about moving on to the helmet, again, before we gotta dive into that too much, keep in mind that you want to make sure that you're maintaining your resistances. So you make sure you have fire, lightning, and cold maxed out. You can also run with maximum, like increasing your maximum resistance does give you some flat damage reduction. It's quite powerful, and you want to make sure you have a good amount of chaos resistance. You can see I'm not even maxed out here for 75%, but in general, there's going to be some maps, some bosses, some mob types where if you don't have enough chaos resistance, you're just going to get obliterated. Like you need a decent amount of chaos resistance. You can come, get that from sockets on certain things. There's some good rolls you can get on like boots and on belt and things like that. You can see I don't even have that listed here. I don't even have it on my chest either. So you have some options to roll for those as well. Next, we need to get enough spirit to be able to run 2 different auras. We want mana remnants and we want cast on critical. So in order to do that, you need a good like 130 to 140 spirit, depending on what extra like support gems you put on these in general, but you're going to want to get at least some spirit. So I usually get these on the amulet. You can get them in like other slots here if you really wanted to max that out, but for this build, you don't really need to. There's also probably an opportunity if you wanted to run like a super streamlined build that would probably be incredibly expensive, and that's if you run Archmage. That means that you can get free lightning damage out of everything, but you need a large amount of spirit to do that, so you probably need spirit rolls on everything to get it done. I didn't really bother wanting to do that just because I'd rather have the survivability, and I'm fine doing Orb of Storms occasionally or just relying on the extra shock chance from the Stormweaver Ascendancy to get that going. But you want to get spirit on your amulet, and that should be just enough for you. I like running, obviously we need spell skill levels because it's, the best stat in the game. Then we want cast speed, and I really like the new desecrated invocated spells have a chance to consume half energy. This is what's going to allow you to do like 8 to 10 comets in a row on a single target, because on a percent chance to blow here, you can get up to 20% on these rolls. You can actually get it so that the immediate, the comet comes out, but it only uses half energy. You get another comet, half energy. You get another comet, half energy, and it just starts triggering like crazy. You can also run global defenses. I'm actually not super sold on this. I would probably re-roll this if I were to craft another one of these just to get this set up. You can also just get general defense on here. For the Path of Building, what I put on here for the amulet is max life, max mana, spell skills, and cast speed. I also have dexterity on here. You can play around with a couple different options because obviously we have like 1, 2, 3, 4 dexterity skill gems in here. You need enough for that, but the biggest limitation for getting dexterity is going to be Malagoros. It does require 56 dexterity in order to equip this. You could play around with attribute cost reductions to get this a little bit lower if you wanted to, just to get this to line up. But I found that you need to run a little bit of dexterity just to be able to hit that cap. You can see that right now I'm at 71 dexterity, so just barely over the requirement by having 23 dexterity on my amulet. But you could re-roll this stat to a better stat that actually gives you some damage output or some survivability if you wanted to. It's just kind of the state that I'm in right now with the amount of wealth that this character has. Then we're going to run Snake Pit. What's great about Snake Pit is that this is what allows us to fork. So when it's placed in the left ring slot, this means that spells can't chain, which you don't worry about anyways, but projectiles from spells will fork when it hits a target. And what's cool about this is you can actually do this on Frostwall as well, which will cause it to detonate and explode. So we have a target here, you can actually cause it to hit the target, it'll fork a bunch, doing extra damage. We'll do freeze buildup, it gives you additional hits, which allows you to crit more, which allows you to get your cast on critical to trigger. So even just getting the Snake Pit here, but this one is incredibly expensive. This is probably, I don't even know, a couple hundred exalted to get this one. So you're not gonna get this right off the bat. So until you get this, you can probably play around with just doing this and then like detonating using snap on the frost wall. But until you get the Snake Pit, it's super useful. It's not necessary. Like, you can actually run like double rare rings and get extra percent increased maximum mana, more cast speed. It also alleviates some of the pressure that you have on resistance being, like right now, most of my resistance comes from one ring, my boots, my belt, and my chest. Everything else is pretty much focused on mana and damage output. So if you didn't decide not to run Snake Pit and you run 2 rare rings instead, you can actually get a whole bunch of extra damage from this as well. And it doesn't put as much pressure on you getting really good rolls on resistance on these 4 items here. Then for belt and boots, this is just gonna be a extra amount of mana by converting energy shield into mana. And also you get resistance from this as well. So these are like your 2 defensive items. So you can see here I have max life, max mana, double resistance. We also have a little extra here with max life and cold resistance on the corruption to get this done as well, excuse me. So the extra charm slots here. I have a long belt. I would probably switch this to a wide belt eventually just to get this set up, but I kind of liked how this ended up. When I corrupted this, you know, I vol or no ball, I put it up here. It ended up working. Obviously, I don't need the physical thorns on this as well. It just kind of ended up being there, but I like the rolls and the resistance and the life mana conversion as well. For the boots, you can see these are not like perfect. Like these, it has chaos resistance, lightning resistance, fire resistance, and then energy shield, but I only have 20% increased movement speed. So I actually need to replace my boots, and I didn't have the balls to vol it either. So I probably could have vol this, but I was a little afraid to do it just because I needed the movement speed here. But you can obviously, by corrupting or some various other methods, you could get up between 30 and 35% movement speed. Movement speed is king. It allows you to dodge things better, get away from enemies better, and it also allows you to be more efficient in farming. So you want to kind of roll that there. So on my path of building for the boots, you can see that I have the corrupted movement speed increase that we have there for 35%, the double energy shield, and then triple resistance. That's probably what I would run. And then I would still run the socket on the boots just to get the extra chaos resistance to stack that up. You can see on the POB, we also have chaos resistance 75% here, which is going to be a little bit more efficient than what I have in game. And what's fun is you actually have some options for the helm as well. Like I said, you could run with some extra stats here that would roll over into the amulet if you wanted to. Personally, for me, I run intelligence and maximum mana for more mana, just to be able to, you know, use more mana. Again, mana is super useful to us. Energy shield on that as well, plus resistance. I got a desecrate on this that gave us fire and chaos resistance, allows us to get the resistance that we need for chaos in general. And another thing that I thought about exploring, which I haven't explored yet, is the new belts that you get from the Well of Souls, the ones that allow you to do some extra cool modifiers on it. You could probably get some really fun ones. Like one thing that I wanted to test, but I haven't really had time to, is messing around with the Darkness Enthroned. What's cool about this is you can actually get some really fun sockets on this, and you can also get effect of Arcane Surge on you by using this belt too. It allows us to be able to get some socketed items from this as well. You would probably, for like the gains bonus from socketed, I would probably go with helmet just because you get a lot of options here. There's some cool things you could do with glove sockets as well on this too. And again, you can also get Arcane Surge. I don't even know how much this rolls up to for like value of Arcane Surge on this slot. I think you can go up to like 60 to 80% impact of Arcane Surge, which again, cast speed and mana regeneration. That's a really big contributing factor to how effective this build can be. So you can play around with this. The downside here is it probably would get a lot more expensive because you would be missing out on the defensive aspects that you normally get on a belt that you would wear. And so you would have to kind of put more pressure on making your gloves, your boots, your one ring, and your chest as defensive as possible. You could also, I'm kind of thinking that you could probably run the Darkness Enthroned belt here instead of Snake Pit, and then run a double rare ring, and that would make up for the loss in defenses that you have here. It also would allow you to roll another percent increased maximum mana, which gives you really good value. When you have a lot of mana, having percent increased maximum mana gives you even, like, it just gets better and better and better the more mana you have. So having 2 of those could be super useful. So that's kind of an idea if you wanted to play around with that, messing with the new Abyss belts, playing around with, you know, the sockets you can get on those, and then potentially removing Snake Pit. This means that you lose the fork benefit, but it also means that you can get some more stats in on the ring slot. And obviously we're running Malagoros. I don't even know, like, how much is Malagoros right now as far as like, I don't even, it's not too bad. It's probably like a couple hundred exalt. Let's see. 1 Orb of Annulment, which just came down. I think Orb of Annulment right now is, gosh, I think it came down to like 100. So if I came down and I want to do Orb of Annulment and I have Exalted Orb, yeah, it's like 100. So it's like 100 Exalt, which isn't too bad. You can find some better ones that have, that are corrupted and get some good rolls on this as well. You get some really cool things on it, but it's not too bad. It actually came down in price since the launch of the season. I think at the very beginning of the season, you would get some different values on this if you're playing Trade League. Obviously, if you're not playing Trade League, you're gonna have to go kill the boss to get this drop and then play around with what stats you get when it does drop. Then for charms and flasks, I have a very like minimalist approach to this. There's like pretty good, unique, the one that like lowers the amount of HP you regenerate but gives you other benefits. You can run that unique flask here if you wanted to. I like running recovery applied instantly just because when you get in a really bad situation and your HP drops low, I like being able to spam life flask charges to get our HP up real quick just to make sure that's there. I also like running chance to gain a charge when you kill an enemy, which is better for mapping and mobbing. You can also run charges per second if you're in specifically a boss battle where there's not going to be a lot of trash mobs to clear out. And then I do the same thing for mana, but instead of applied instantly, especially for a build like this, I like running more recovery if used while on low mana, because then you get a lot more mana back when your mana goes low, which oftentimes, because we're doing Eldritch Battery, your mana, when you take a big hit, will just have a big chunk taking out of it, and so you're going to be low mana because of Eldritch Battery. When you take a hit, you get more mana recovery from the flask, and then you get charges for that as well. I think the way Path of Exile 2 is set up right now, I feel like it's almost non-negotiable that you need a Thawing Charm and a Stone Charm. There's also, you can get the unique Thawing Charm that has some other benefits too, but these I think are sufficient for pretty much every purpose that you need. In fact, I would almost always run a Thawing Charm and a Stone Charm no matter what, just because stuns and freezes are so devastating in this game. It means that if you stand still for any reason, you're gonna get blasted into oblivion, turn into a space cadet and sent into orbit. And so being able to avoid those CCs are very important. And then for the last slot, you could run with like a Rarity Charm. I like running with a Chaos Charm, especially if I'm not maxed out on Chaos resistance here as well. So that's an option for you too. When it comes to the Stormweaver Ascendancy, there's actually some leeway here. You don't necessarily need Shaper of Storms. Again, you can add like a lightning thing to it to get extra shock. And also if you're running like extra lightning damage here, you can rely on this to get some extra value here. You can see I even have it on both of these. Like you could probably remove extra lightning damage on this if you wanted to. I like having the extra shock here. Shaper of Storms might be a little bit of an overkill. Again, we're in like the 95th percentile of optimization, so you could run some minor changes here to get this cleaned up. What I would do right off the bat though is I would come down here and get Arcane Surge right off. Like getting the cast speed and mana regeneration is incredibly powerful, and you have it on pretty much all the time permanently, which is really good. And then if you go further down, that's when you get a 20% of damage is taken from mana before life. So if you're running Eldritch Battery over Energy Shield variant, you get this 20% here. There's also another node up in the top left corner of the tree that you could grab from an Annul or Anoint if you wanted to. Mana from right over here. You could grab Mental Perseverance for 10% here. We get a little bit more from these nodes here. So 4, 4, 8 plus 8, 16. You get another 20 here. And then you can also get this like Feathered Raiment for even more. Like I said, I have, does it even tell me? Yeah, I've got like 80 to 90% damage taken from mana before life, which is really good. This node here, Strike Twice, I would say is non-negotiable. You get double shock, and it's very easy to add magnitude of shock in so many different ways. Like we have this one here for magnitude of shock. You have other options here for magnitude of shock. So you can get this magnitude of shock back, but having 2 shocks on the target gives you a large amount of damage amp, which is very powerful. If you wanted to, you could probably kill both of these nodes. You could play around with the infusions. I don't think you need to all that much. The distance is quite nice if you wanted to play around with that. You can also get crit chance for spells. Like this node here is super valuable. You can actually just get crit chance for spells, and then you can get like, you know, further away. Like you can actually just drop this node if you wanted to, and then just get crit chance for spells if you really wanted to. I think this is probably what most people are going to play with anyways, just because you want the damage taken from mana if you're running Eldritch, plus Arcane Surge, and then you want the shock bonuses as well. Again, even though we're playing a cold build, I still don't run Chill. I think they need to look at Shock, Ignite, and Chill and compare them together, because I feel like Shock is just so much better than all the other ailments because it's just a raw damage amp that it's kind of sickening. Even when we're playing a Frostbolt build, we're still running Shock anyways, just because it's so incredibly good. But I digress. So lastly, let's talk about how you're going to like piecemeal this build together. I think it's valuable when you're playing a build from start to finish, like level 1 to level 100 or whatever, or level 1 to Uber Arbiter and all the Uber bosses to get that going. So because you're not going to have, while leveling, you're not going to have the forking from Snake Pit. You're not going to have like the crazy spell speed and skill speed and cast speed that you have here. here. So there's going to be some other things you're going to have to supplement in order to get those bonuses. So in this case, what I would add to this build while leveling is going to be these two orb options. You have Orb of Storms and you have Frost Bomb. These are going to be huge for you because when you're leveling, you're not going to have the kind of freeze buildup that you will late game. And Frost Bomb allows you to get that super easily. You can see I kind of use this while leveling, and then I never even use Jewelers on it to get higher because I don't really need it anymore. It just gives you incredible chill. It applies a little bit of exposure, which is helpful. While leveling, elemental weakness can actually be quite a big chug on mana, so having Frost Bomb on that in general is super useful. And also if there's a dangerous rare or a boss coming towards you and you're in a lot of trouble, you can throw a Frost Bomb down there. We're not really going to be doing anything with the cold infusion that comes out of this, but it does give you a little bit more safety until you get more freeze buildup later on. And what's cool about Orb of Storms is it gives you that shock chance before you have extra shock damage or chance to, you know, everything does shock damage or shock chance from that. Putting the Orb of Storms down is really useful, and you pretty much want to do this while leveling the entire time. Pretty much always be casting on Orb of Storms while you're leveling up. That's going to give you a nice damage bonus. It gives you like the chaining spells from it as well. And you don't have a crazy amount of cast speed. You can see that with the new Orb of Storms, the way it works is while you're standing on it, the number of spells you cast will eventually consume the Orb of Storms and drop an element, you know, a lightning infusion on the ground. But when you have crazy cast speed, like I can put it down and then it's gone in an instant. Like I put it down and it's gone in an instant. Like you cast so fast that it chews it up. But while you're leveling, that's not the case. You can put these down, stand on them, and shoot them out. While leveling as well, I would also make sure that you get overabundance. This allows you to do 2 of them at once. This just gives you a little bit more leeway. You can even stand on the in between of them just to get some extra damage there. But it's a nice little bonus of lightning damage. It gives you your shock chance and allows you to play around with it as well. Though late game, you don't need to do it as much. The only thing I would do for it for late game is I would make sure you get your lightning infusions. The main reason for this is that when you get your lightning infusion, you'll notice that, like, since I have lightning infusion now, if I put down Frost Wall, you can see it's electrified. And it actually counts as double hits. So like when this detonates, so when it explodes, it does the cold damage and the lightning damage, and you can get crits from those, which stacks up cast on critical like crazy. So for late game, the only thing you really care about when it comes to Orb of Storms is just getting your lightning infusion, which if you're trying to do things like this, you could get another elemental infusions. You can even play around with coming up to the elemental infusion options over here as well. So like getting additional elemental infusions here. There's even some over here somewhere, like maximum lightning infusions. There's even some down here that you could play around with if you really wanted to, which I'm blanking. It's the infusion spot. It's like really close to the start in the beginning here. Yeah, right here. So you got like elemental infusions. You get remnants collected further away and spell damage from that bonus as well, which if you're doing Orb of Storms every time you're walking around, it's super useful. Then one of the most important combos while you're leveling, because you're not going to have the spell forking, you're not going to have the splitting, you're not going to have the extra freeze build up. So what you're going to want to do while leveling is make very good use of snap. So what's cool about this is you can throw the Frostbolt and then you can snap it. So you can actually shoot this out and snap it. And snap while leveling is incredibly powerful. It gives you a really big burst of damage and it helps you kill. So while leveling, what I would do is that you hit a tanky target, put down elemental weakness if you have the mana for it, make sure you have your Orb of Storms on the ground, throw out your Frost Wall, and then throw out a whole bunch of Frostbolts. And then while the Frostbolts are in the air, cast snap on the rare or the boss. That will cause the frost bolts to detonate. It will cause the frost walls to detonate because if we take, I believe, if I can take this off, if I take this off and put it down, I think this actually doesn't detonate. Right, so you can see how it like goes through the frost wall, but it takes a lot longer to break it, and that's because we're not forking. So once you start forking, that's when the frost wall blows up like crazy. So when you're leveling with frost wall, it's useful to be able to detonate it with snap, because that will clear it out of the way. And also if you end up body blocking yourself on accident, you can just throw out the snap and detonate it with that as well. So you're gonna be relying a lot more while leveling on snap, Orb of Storms, frost wall, and frost bomb to be able to fill that gap. But then once you get to late game and these things start coming online, all you really need to do is do Frostbolt, unless you're fighting a really tanky monster. Then you'll want to put in like a Frost Wall or something like that to do it. You can also just generally use Frost Wall as a blocker for projectiles and charging enemies, which is super nice while leveling. So if you see like projectiles coming towards you, throw the Frost Walls out and use it as a blocker. It'll hit the Frost Walls instead of you. And I think that's about it. This video is pretty long, a lot longer than I thought it was going to be, but I wanted to go through all the different elements. Again, Path of Building is linked down below if you just want to use that as a reference. I don't really care what works for you, but I just wanted to post this because a lot of people were were asking for me to post the build so they could see it and just use it as a reference if they wanted to use it, or just straight up copy it if they feel like they enjoy the idea of just being a Frostbolt maniac kind of endgame cold-based sorceress. So if you enjoyed the video, let me know. If you want me to do more builds in the future, what I did on launch for Path of Exile 2 was a lot of leveling builds because that was the biggest necessary element at the time. But now we're probably in a point where we can do full builds top to bottom, like beginning, you know, early game, mid game, late game, plus having like really strong late game builds with the full path of building, I think makes the most sense. So if you want to see more builds from me, or you want me to, like, I probably can just re-roll and make more characters, more classes, things like that, let me know in the comments down below. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.